Okay. Hello, friends. I'm John Clark. I am kind of called as the instructor for this Come Follow Me study hour. And welcome everyone who's coming, and welcome those of you who are joining us or watching the video, joining us via video. How's that? That sounds pretty reasonable. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, share my desktop, and show you what our lesson is this week. We'll get rid of some of the stuff that's in the way here. So our reading for the next 2 weeks is for this week, starting tonight through Sunday, we're reading the book of Haggai and the book of Zechariah. And then for the next week, starting a week from today, our reading is the book of Malachi, which is the last book in our Old Testament. So these are the readings for the next 2 weeks, these 3 prophets. Again, the purposes of this Come Follow Me study are to provide background and context for the lessons, particularly with the Old Testament. I like to provide some historical background and a little bit of background about what's going on in the verses and chapters. I don't want to, we have gospel doctrine teachers, you have lots of lessons who are going to teach you principles from these lessons. So I don't want to do a ton of that, just bring up some things that might help us in our understanding as we read, so that the purpose is to read and then try to identify principles, and then try to identify principles and then try to live by those principles. So this will help you with the reading portion of the program. If you want a copy of the PDF that you're viewing now, or you have any questions or comments, this is my email, je5clark@yahoo.com. Easy, okay? So you can questions there, and I can review that and respond to that. So this is just a little bit kind of a starting post again. This is the arrangement of the Hebrew Bible, which is called the Tanakh. Starts off with the Torah, which is the books of Moses, the prophets, which are the Nevi'im, the former prophets, which are historical, the latter prophets, those are divided into major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then the 12 minor prophets, Hosea through Malachi. And then at the end of the last section of the Hebrew Bible is called the writings. Those include Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Song of Solomon, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Ezekiel, Ether, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, which in the Hebrew Bible is one. It's not split in half. It's Ezra, Nehemiah, and then Chronicles, okay? So in our Protestant Bible, of which the King James Version is one, it goes the law, historical books. So where we are now in history is covered in Ezra and Nehemiah, okay? Then the wisdom's books, which are Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, then the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah. Lamentations is included here in the Protestant Bible because it's believed that Jeremiah was the author of Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, and then again, the 12, what they call minor prophets. It's not that their prophecies aren't important, it's that their books are small. So they're just called the 12 minor prophets. So we're dealing with these last 3, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. So I'm just going to take a look at a little bit of the timeline. This is just the last part of the timeline that is in the Come Follow Me manual, both online and the published Come Follow Me manual. And the 3 prophets that we're talking about. So here's where, above here is the kingdom of David. So there's Saul, David, and Solomon. At Solomon's death, then they're broken up into 2 kingdoms, the kingdom of Israel, which is called the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, which includes Jerusalem, the southern kingdom, okay? So they're split, and around this time, the 10 tribes of Israel, the northern kingdom, are conquered by Assyria and scattered in about 722 BC. This is a big touchstone for us, the reign of Zedekiah, because this is about 600 BC. Lehi and Sariah the Lehites and the Mulekites leave and go to the Americas, and Jerusalem is captured by Babylon. Okay, so eventually, the history of them returning to Jerusalem, some of the people returning to Jerusalem, is covered in Ezra and Nehemiah. And then this, see, there's Ezra when it's recorded here, return to Jerusalem. But these are the three prophets we're going to talk about: Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Zerubbabel is the name of although the Babylonians are still in charge, Zerubbabel is set up kind of as the ruler of Jerusalem, and not an entirely independent. It's kind of a puppet kingdom at this moment in its career, okay? And does through Persia. But they are allowed to rebuild a temple, which is called the Second Temple, or the Temple of Zerubbabel, because Zerubbabel was the political leader of the time. And Zerubbabel happens to be, as promised to King David, of the house and lineage of David. Okay, all of the leaders in the southern kingdom are still of the lineage of David. The northern kingdom moves around from dynasty to dynasty, but these all are, as promised by the Lord to David, they are all of the house of David. Okay, so this is kind of the history we're dealing with. It's called post-exilic, after the exile into Babylon, when some of the people are allowed to return. Okay, so we'll talk about the prophet Haggai. The name means feast or festive. Okay, he was the first of three post-exile prophets who belonged to the period of Jewish history which began after the return from captivity in Babylon, along with Zechariah. And Haggai and Zechariah were kind of contemporaries, and Malachi, who lives about 100 years after these two. We don't know hardly anything about his personal history. The book of Haggai itself doesn't offer any biological details about his ancestry or anything else in his life outside of his prophecies, which happened to arrive around 520 BCE. He's only mentioned in one other book of the Bible, in the book of Ezra, Ezra 5:1 and 6:14. Okay, remember, Ezra is kind of a historical compilation. Ezra is not really a prophet; he is a scribe. Okay. So we think that Haggai may have been one of the captives taken to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar when Jerusalem was conquered. He began prophesying in Jerusalem around 16 years after the return of the Jews to Judah, around 520 BC. The work of rebuilding the temple had been put to a stop through the intrigues of the Samaritans. Okay, so they start, and then the Samaritans start to interfere. We read about this in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. And after having been suspended for 18 years, the work was resumed through the efforts of Haggai and Zechariah. They exhorted the people, which roused them from their lethargy and introduced them to take advantage of a change in policy of the Persian government under King Darius I. Okay, so there's a little bit of a change of policy, and we're going to talk a little bit about some historical figures that figure into the book of Haggai. First, we want to talk about who are the Samaritans, because the Samaritans interfere with what's going on at the Temple of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is here, okay? When the kingdoms are split kind of along this line, here we have the northern kingdom, okay? And here's the southern kingdom. But the northern kingdom, its capital is a city called Samaria, okay? And so when they're captured, when they're carried away, okay, the people who return to that area are Jews who lived there, but they also mixed with Babylonians who came from the area, or other original inhabitants of the area before they were conquered by the children of Israel, okay? So this then becomes a stronghold for Samaritans, and Samaritans cross in toward Jerusalem and make fun of and try to interfere with the building of the walls around the city and the rebuilding of the temple, okay? So these are the Samaritans, like when in the New Testament, we'll read about the Samaritan woman who hears him at the well, okay, and believes him. These are the Samaritans. So they're a combination of people who used to be of the house of Israel, but don't worship anymore, and other native peoples, and then people that the Babylonians shipped into the area after they conquered it, okay? So from the kingdom of Judah, the Jews are, if we talk about Jews like the Book of Mormon, Jews are the people who inhabit the kingdom of Judah, whether they are of the lineage of Judah or not. They are the people who are the people of the kingdom of Judah, okay? So the Jews here, the inhabitants of the kingdom of Judah, and the people who return in Christ's time look on Samaritans as kind of non-believers, not in the covenant, okay? It's these same people who seek to interfere with building the temple and then rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem, which makes it a city. Bill, I know you've been there. All of the ancient cities in the Holy Land have walls around them. That's how they maintain their ability to be cities and not be conquered, is that they have walls around them so that they're protected. And even people who are out in the fields can come into the city walls and be protected, okay? So they're starting to rebuild Jerusalem. Here are some people that we're going to read about in the book of Haggai, okay? Cyrus II of Persia, he's from about 600 to 530 BCE. He's known as Cyrus the Great, and he was the founder of the Achaemenid Empire, the first Persian Empire. Under his rule, the empire embraced all of the previous civilized states of the ancient Near East and expanded vastly and eventually conquered most of Western Asia and much of Central Asia. So Cyrus the Great conquered most all of the Middle East and Western Asia and much of Central Asia. He's well known for having respected the customs and religions of the lands he conquered. The Edict of Restoration, in which Cyrus authorized and encouraged the return of the Israelites to the land of Israel following his conquest of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, he conquered the Babylonians who had conquered Jerusalem when Lehi left. It's described in the Bible. He left a lasting legacy on the Jewish religion due to his role in ending the Babylonian captivity and facilitating the Jewish return to Zion. According to Isaiah 45:1, God anointed Cyrus for this task, even referring to him as a Messiah, an anointed one. So Cyrus is the only non-Jewish figure or children of Israel figure in the Bible to be revered in this capacity as an anointed one, not the Messiah, but a Messiah. He was anointed and set apart to help the Jews return to Jerusalem, okay? Also, in the book of Haggai, we'll meet an earlier king, a later king, this is Cyrus, called Darius the Great. He's Darius the First. He was a Persian ruler who served as the third king of kings of the Persian Empire. He reigned from 522 BC until his death in 486. He ruled the empire at the time when it had the most territory. He's mentioned in the books of Haggai, Zechariah, and Ezra Nehemiah. Remember, in the Jewish scriptures, they're one book. And in Ezra chapter 6, he renews the decree of Cyrus to build the temple at Jerusalem. So this happens during Haggai's reign, okay? So they exhorted the people. The work was interrupted for 18 years. Then the people were encouraged to resume the work and to take advantage of a change of policy of the Persian government under Darius the First, who was the father of this Darius the Great. Under Darius the Great, and he renews that decree of Cyrus and encourages the Israelites to return to Jerusalem and build the temple. So this is the territory of this Persian Empire of Cyrus II and Darius the First. You can see that here's Jerusalem. There's Tyre, Sidon, Damascus, which is in Syria. They go all the way Turkey into Greece, okay? They go all the way here. They're going clear into India, toward India and toward China, okay? Parthia, Persia, okay? They're here at the on the edge of the Persian Gulf. They're over here, not only in Jerusalem, but in Libya, okay? So this is, they have a lot of territory. It's the largest territory there. The book of Haggai records events in 520 BC, some 18 years after Cyrus had conquered Babylon, and issued a decree in 538 BC allowing the captives Judites to return to Judea. Cyrus saw the restoration of the temple as necessary for the restoration of religious practices and a sense of peoplehood after the long exile. 2 chapters of the book of Haggai contain an exhortation to the people to be more zealous about the public worship of God and the rebuilding of his temple. His preaching produced the desired effect. We read that in Haggai 1:14 through 15. In chapter 2, he consoles those who were distressed by the plain appearance of the new temple in comparison to the former beauty of Solomon's temple, which was destroyed by the Babylonians. It was leveled, okay? But they're consoled by the assurance that the day of the Lord is near, and that then the glory of the later houses shall be greater than those of the former. But he warns them that just as the touch of the unclean pollutes all about it, so the worldly spirit of the people had brought a curse on all their labor and increase. He looks forward to the future hopefully, certain that in spite of present depression, the nation is capable of greater. So he's kind of a hopeful prophet. He doesn't pull any punches, though. He says the reason that you had this destruction is because you turned away from God. But if you return, he will restore. Again, that's a strong message in all the latter parts of the Old Testament. There is a scattering and a restoration in the book of Haggai as well. So I just wanted to take a look at some comparisons of Solomon's temple and the temple of Zerubbabel, okay? This is a little bit of a chart of the Temple of Solomon. Here's the inner court. This is the building of the temple. This is the altar where they offer sacrifice day and night, steps up to the altar. So on this altar, burning day and night, is a cauldron that contains the fat of the sacrificed animals, and the sacrifice is constantly being consumed in that fat and creating a good smell at the temple. The temple of Zerubbabel is a little different. It's bigger, but there's an altar there, and there's an outside court, okay? So it's slightly bigger, but it's not as impressive in terms of the materials and the size. It doesn't compare to Solomon's temple, okay? So the second temple is often called the Temple of Zerubbabel, okay? The Temple of Zerubbabel the Jews considered the Temple of Zerubbabel inferior to the Temple of Solomon for, among them, these 5 reasons. They'd lost the Ark of the Covenant. It was lost or burned at the destruction of Jerusalem and never recovered. That ark was the ark that they carried with them. They created in the wilderness. It was in the tabernacle, and then it was moved into the temple. The top of it contained 2 cherubim. It was called the mercy seat. Inside of the ark were copies of the stone tablets, and other things were placed inside there. The rod of Aaron that flowered before Pharaoh, okay? It did not have the Shekinah, or manifestation of the glory of God. What we read when Solomon's temple was dedicated, that there was a shadow at night, there was a pillar of light by night and a cloud by day above the temple, which indicated the presence of the Spirit of God and the acceptance of the temple by God, okay? They did not have the Urim and Thummim. We'll talk about what those are. It did not have the holy fire upon the altar, okay? That was fire that was originally sent down from God and continuous. So when it was destroyed, there was a break in it. It's a little bit like the Olympic flame, which is supposed to go on. Okay, there was a break in that. And also, the Jews considered that by the time of the second temple, after Malachi, that the spirit of prophecy was gone from the people. There were no longer prophets, okay? So here's a little size comparison. Here's the first temple. Then there is the temple of Zerubbabel around 530, okay? Okay. And then there is the temple of Herod. This is the temple that when we talk about the temple at Christ's time is the temple of Herod. And the temple of Herod was a major, major, major renovation of the second temple of Zerubbabel. It was larger, it was big, it was so big that they created a retaining wall around the Temple Mount to increase the size of the Temple Mount in order to increase the size of the temple on top of the Temple Mount, okay? Now, when the Jews, or the Hebrew Bible, talks about the Urim and Thummim, okay, they are part of the garb of the high priest, okay? So this is the garb of the high priest of the Aaronic priesthood when he goes into the Holy of Holies, okay? And you'll read about this in Leviticus. There's a breastplate on it, okay, that has stones for each of the 12 tribes arranged in rows of three. There are 4 rows of 3 for each of the 12 tribes. The Urim and Thummim were also jewels that were placed inside this breastplate. They were not visible. They were 2 clear stones, okay? Okay? These are onyx stones with 6 of the tribes inscribed on each of them. But the Urim and Thummim were part of this ceremonial breastplate that had stones for each of the 12 tribes. And there was a little sort of pocket or a little holder for the Urim and Thummim, which means the lights. And I'll look it up again. Okay. So those are the Urim and Thummim. Those are different. In fact, we'll just go to the place here. Let me see if I have it. Oh, I don't have it here. But if I go to Google Chrome, here we go. Yeah. We can look at the libraries, scriptures. Let's go to the Bible dictionary and see if we can find what the Urim and Thummim actually means. Sometimes I forget. So we'll go to study helps. We'll go to not Bible maps, but we'll go to the Bible dictionary. Lights and perfections, I think, is what it means. T. We'll go to T. Urim and Thummim. Lights and perfections. Okay. Okay. And at the time, they were understood to be these stones that were placed inside the breastplate of the high priest of the Aaronic priesthood, who was the presiding priest at the temple, Solomon's temple and the temple of Zerubbabel. Okay. All right. So back to our little presentation here. So that is Haggai. Haggai is one of the first of the 2 prophets who encouraged the people to rebuild the temple, called the second temple, or the temple of Zerubbabel. The second one is Zechariah, okay? The prophet Zechariah means God is remembered, or God remembered. There, again, not much is known about his life other than what can be inferred from the book. Zechariah 1:1 introduces him as the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo. Ezra 5:1 and 6:14 names Zechariah as the son of Iddo, but it's likely that Berechiah was Zedekiah's father, and Iddo was his grandfather. It has been speculated that Iddo, who is mentioned in Nehemiah 12:4 and 16, was the head of a priestly family who returned with Zerubbabel, and that Zechariah may have been a priest as well as a prophet. That does not happen in the Old Testament very much. The only other one that I can think of right off the bat is the prophet Samuel, okay? Samuel became the high priest of the Aaronic priesthood and was also a prophet called of God, okay? But most of Old Testament prophets were called outside of the sort of religious hierarchy. This is supported by Zechariah's interest in the temple and the priesthood, and from Iddo's preaching in the Book of Chronicles. So that's where the speculation comes from. His prophetic career probably began in the second year of Darius the Great, king of the Persian Empire in 520 BC. His greatest concern appears to have been with building the second temple. The book of Zechariah has 3 divisions, 1 through 6, is a series of visions sketching the future of the people of God. So this is important as they're returning and they're rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and they're rebuilding the temple and reestablishing themselves in the land that God gave them. Zechariah 7 through 8 addresses the quality of life God wants his renewed people to enjoy, containing many encouraging promises to them. And Zechariah 9 through 14 contains prophecies about the Messiah and events preceding his second coming. Okay. In 1 through 6, it begins with a preface which recalls the nation's history for the purpose of presenting a solemn warning to the present generation. Then follows a series of 8 visions, succeeding one another in one night, which may be regarded as a symbolical history of Israel, intended to furnish consolation to the returned exiles and to stir up hope in their minds. The symbolic crowning of Joshua, which is in Zechariah 6, 9 through 15, describes how the kingdoms of the world become the kingdom of God's Messiah. In 7 and 8, which are delivered 2 years after 1 through 6, are an answer to the question whether the days of mourning for the destruction of the city should be kept any longer, because they were in formal mourning as a nation because they were captive. And the question was, can we end this formal period of mourning and build? And an encouraging address to the people assures them of God's presence and blessings. 9 through 14 consists of 2 prophetic oracles or burdens. A burden, in the language of early modern English and King James, is not just a load that's on you. A burden is also what you call the refrain of a song or the chorus. Okay, so since these oracles or prophecies are written as poetry, there are reasons that they're called. There's a reason that they're called a burden. Okay, they are a recurring theme poem. The first oracle, Zechariah 9 through 11, gives an outline of the course of God's providential dealings with his people down to the time of the coming of the Messiah. The second oracle, 12 through 14, points out the glories that await Israel in the latter day and the final conflict and triumph of God's kingdom. So in many ways, they're reminiscent of the end of the book of Isaiah. Okay? Here are some interesting facts about Zerubbabel's temple. It's Israel's second temple. It's built after the return of the Babylonian captivity. The Jews have been home for about 16 years. The foundation was laid in 536 BC. It was discontinued in 534 BC, resumed again in 520, as we've noted, completed in 516, and dedicated on March 12, 515 BC. Not March 12th, that's the 12th month of the 12th day of the 3rd month. It stood for about 500 years. It's exceeded the dimensions of Solomon's temple. In magnificence and splendor, Zerubbabel's temple did not compare with Solomon's temple. It did not have the Ark of the Covenant. Darius the Persian, we talked about him, authorized the temple to be completed, and he authorized the use of the royal treasury for the building of the temple. So he allowed himself to pay for part of the building of the temple. The work of restoring Jerusalem went on for some 70 years after the temple was built. That is, rebuilding the walls and rebuilding the city. The prophets Haggai and Zechariah encouraged the work of the temple. Ezra focuses attention on the decree of Cyrus. Haggai stresses the need to rebuild the temple. Zechariah predicted the rebuilding of the temple. Okay, so this is Zerubbabel's temple. Okay. So before we move on to not this week, but next week's reading, do I have any questions or any comments that people want to make? Bill or Brother Lee, if you want to unmute, you can go ahead and unmute. I can also look and see if there's any question in the chat if you feel like hesitant to unmute yourself and ask a question.
No questions from me.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, then we'll just go forward. This is our last little section. This is of the prophet Malachi. The name Malachi means my messenger. Again, Little is known of the biography of the author of the book of Malachi, although it has been suggested that he may have been Levitical. He may have been a Levite, thus may have been in a priestly family as well. Some scholars believe the name Malachi is not a proper noun or name, but rather an abbreviation of the term messenger of Yahweh. This reading could be, or God. This reading could be based upon Malachi 3:1. Behold, I will send my messenger. If my messenger is taken literally as the name of Malachi, or it could be the name of the book is my messenger. Okay, it's not necessarily the name of the author. It's the book of my messenger, which contains my message. Okay, so just know that that's out there. But Malachi, the name Malachi means my messenger. The book of Malachi is, the chapter divisions are slightly different in the Hebrew Bible or the Tanakh. In the Hebrew Bible, there are only 3 chapters in Malachi. Malachi 1, 2, 3. Okay. In the Protestant Bible, there are 4, and the division is Malachi 3 is the first 18 verses of Malachi. Okay. And then Malachi 4 in the Protestant Bible is what is in the Hebrew Bible, Malachi 3, 19 through 24. Okay. So again, Malachi 3 altogether, it's divided in the Protestant Bible. And you'll see how it makes a little bit of sense, okay? It's written to correct lax religious and social behavior of the Israelites, particularly among the priests, the Levites, and the people who were making the decisions about religious community. In post-exilic Jerusalem, about 430 BC, Malachi 1:1 through 2:10 indicates that Malachi's audience is the priests and the priestly class, reproving them for their neglect of the service to God. Malachi 2:11 speaks against marriage outside of the covenant, divorce and civil wives within the covenant, and then the neglect of tithe paying, and reproving the general spirit of discontent. The faithful are encouraged to remain faithful with the assurance that the Lord is mindful of them and that the disobedient shall fail in the day of the Lord's coming. Notable passages are Malachi 3:1, which is quoted in Malachi 11:10. For this is he of whom it is spoken, behold, I will send my messenger from before thy face, which shall prepare the way for thee. That I have sent my messenger from before thy face, which will prepare the way for thee is the quote from Malachi, and this then is in reference to John the Baptist. Malachi 3:7 through 12 is an exposition of the importance of tithing. Malachi 4:1, which speaks of the coming of the Lord, and Malachi 4:5 through 6, which deals with the return of Elijah, is also cited in D&C 2, in 128:17, and in Joseph Smith History 1:37 through 39. So this is the section where Moroni appears, okay? All of Malachi 3 and 4 in our Protestant Bible is quoted by the Savior to the Nephites as recorded in 3 Nephi 24 and 25, okay? So I just wanted to take a look at the comparison at a couple of things in Malachi. In Malachi 1:1 through 5, it talks about who the Lord loves and who the Lord hates. The burden or the chorus or the pronouncement of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, saith the Lord, yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Saith the Lord, yet I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau, okay? And laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Whereas Edom, which is the kind of land for Esau, saith, we were impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever. And your eyes shall see, and you shall say, the Lord will be magnified from the border of Israel. Okay? So in the Tanakh, it's a pronouncement, the word of the Lord to Israel through Malachi. I've shown love to you, saith the Lord. But you ask, how have you shown us this love? After all, declares the Lord, Esau is Jacob's brother, yet I have accepted Jacob and have rejected Esau. So it's not that he loves or hates, he has accepted their offering and rejected Esau's. Sorry, let me go ahead and fix the view on this. I have made his hills a desolation, his territory a home for beasts of the desert rather than dragons of the wilderness. Okay. The people damned forever of the Lord. Your eyes shall behold it, and you shall declare, great is the Lord beyond the borders of Israel. Okay. So it's just a little bit of a difference in what the Lord sort of says is love or hate. Okay. The land of Edom, or the Edomites, is here. So this is the Dead Sea. Here's Jerusalem. Here's Bethlehem. Here's Beersheba. This is kind of the end of the kingdoms down here. Here's Moab. This is where Ruth is from, Moab. And Edom is not part of that, the land of the promised land, but is the land where Esau, Jacob's brother, inherits. There's a blood relationship between the Israelites and the Edomites, okay? Okay, in spite of the kinship, there seems to be great mutual hatred, and wars were of constant occurrence. That's in Numbers, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. The Edomites spoke a language that closely resembled Hebrew. In Malachi 1:6, we read about the audience. Who is he speaking to? King James Version, as a son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If I then be a father, where is mine honor? And if I be a master, where is my fear? Saith the Lord of hosts, unto you, O priests that despise my name. And ye say, wherein have we despised thy name? The Tanakh, a son should honor his father, and a slave his master. Now if I am a father, where is the honor due me? And if I am a master, where is the reverence due me? Saith the Lord of hosts, the Lord of the hosts of Israel's army. To you, O priests, who scorn my name. But you ask, how have we scorned your name? Okay, all right. And then he goes on to talk about tithing, you know. And part of this promise is in Malachi 3:10, where we read about the windows of heaven, you know, where after this is, will a man rob God? How any of you rob me in tithes and offerings? So he's accusing the priests of robbing him of tithes and offerings, okay? They're to bring them to the storehouse, and they are to use them for the poor of the people, which the priests had not been doing. They'd just been collecting money, okay? But Malachi 3:10 says, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, or pour you out a blessing, that there should be not room enough to receive it. This is the Tanakh. Bring the full tithe to the storehouse, which is set, the storehouse is set up in Nehemiah 13:10-13, and let there be food in mine house, and thus put me to the test, saith the Lord of hosts. I will surely open the floodgates of the sky for you and pour down blessings upon you. It's like sluices in an old irrigation system, okay? When you open the floodgates, then the waters can come through, okay, in an old irrigation system. So the windows of heaven are really the floodgates, or the sluices of the sky, which allows the water to come through, and blessings will come down like water, okay? And then I just wanted to share with you the final verses of Malachi, okay? Because the end of the book of Malachi is a little bit different in the Hebrew Bible. King James Version, verse 5. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. In the Tanakh, it reads, Lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord. He shall reconcile parents with children, and children with their parents, so that when I come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. And then this promise is repeated in the Hebrew Bible. Lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord. So this little verse here is repeated in the Tanakh as the last verse of Scripture, okay? So that's the book of Malachi. So on our last little section here, we talked about Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. These two are particularly interested in getting the second temple rebuilt and the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And then Malachi was interested in retrenching the people and making sure that the priests and the people returned to the Lord so that the Lord could visit them with his promises again, revisit them. Okay. So I just wanted to, as we kind of end up, to prepare us, because next time we meet, we won't meet before Christmas. We'll meet again in the new year. But when we meet again, I just want to point out a couple of things. That we talked about the first temple and the second temple, the temple of Zerubbabel. And then the temple, Herod's temple, okay, is a huge reconstruction of and reordering of the temple itself. So this is the size of Solomon's temple, okay? This is the size of a football field, okay? And then this is the size of the Herod's temple complex, okay? So there's a retaining wall on the outside of this to build up the area in order to build a temple of this size, okay? The western retaining wall, this all is destroyed at the end of the New Testament by the Romans in 70 AD, okay? The western wall in Jerusalem is the western retaining wall of the Temple Mount. It's not part of the temple. It's the retaining wall that was built in order to increase the size of the temple at Jerusalem. But you can just see that this is the temple, all of the temple building at Solomon's temple. This is this section right here, okay? So in here is the holy place, and then back behind is the Holy of Holies, okay? There's two courtyards, there's a women's courtyard, there's gates. This is all part of the new temple complex for Herod's temple, okay? So last thing I want to point out here, I'll just do it on the internet, is we'll go back a little bit. If you're interested in, so the Old Testament history ends at about 400 BC, and then the New Testament takes up at 1 AD, all right? So if we look at the Bible chronology, we can look a little bit at the chronology of the Old Testament, and it will cover sort of the intertestament between Old Testament and New Testament history, okay? So if you keep going down here, you get to the capture of Jerusalem in 587. Then you get to some Jewish history. You get to Darius. You get to Ezra and Nehemiah here. And then you get to, then you'll get to some secular history, okay? The last we hear, Darius is slain, Alexander the Great, and the dismemberment of his history. Then you have a little section here that is just Jewish history, okay? Palestine retaken by the Egyptians. Manasseh becomes a high priest. Here you have the Hasmoneans. Herod is a Hasmonean ruler, okay? You'll get the here you get, sorry, somewhere you get the Maccabees. Daily sacrifice interrupted. Here it is, the victory of Judas Maccabeus, the Maccabites, and then they rededicate the temple in 165 BC. This is the miracle of the lights that Hanukkah is the celebration of. They're able to cleanse the temple, ritually cleanse it, and keep the oil lamps burning, okay, inside the temple, inside the holy place. So that's just a little bit of history in between. When we come back, we'll start the New Testament, and that's a whole other set of histories. But one of the continuous things is that this second temple then is the temple of, this temple of Herod is a remodeling of the second temple, Okay. So that's what I have for you. Again, if you have questions, this is my email address, je5clark@yahoo.com. And this is the reading for this week, Haggai and Zechariah. For next week, Malachi. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. I thank you all for joining us. Again, you have my email and stuff if you have questions. And I hope this helps in your reading and study of the Old Testament. So thank you. Brother Lee, I guess you can turn it off. I'm going to just, if everybody's okay, I'm just going to go ahead and lead. And then Brother Lee can turn the recording off and then get it prepared to go up on.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again, Brother Clark.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
When are you back in the States, my friend?
I am flying back today.
Okay.
Well, today meaning Tuesday. It's
Yes.
it's
Gotcha.
currently almost 5 a.m. here. So
Okay. Well,
yeah.
thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Brother Haley, and we'll see you later.
See you, John. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Okay. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.